benefited patients that go through that service. So it's really worth having a look around some of these things. If you're going away thinking, how can I practically do this? Where do I even start? You know, steal some of these job descriptions with pride, you know, and take that away into your department and see what you can do. And some of the examples today, you will be able to hopefully steal some of those with pride as well. Next slide. So obviously the work from our community of practice was born from some of the work that we originally looked at with the Matrons Handbook, which was published from NHS England, and within that, the Matrons Handbook, you know, gives a guide onto what the matron's role is about, and so our presentations today are themed around the sections within the handbook, which is on workforce planning and resource management, education, training and development, and in particular recruitment and retention. I think that is a real key theme that people need to think about, and really please do pop things in the chat on your thoughts around this, because we've got many examples where having some of these joint roles have saved people from leaving the NHS. And have actually, as an organisation, been able to attract more staff. And you know, you might be new to all of this, and you have to have faith. You know, this is us thinking about things in a completely new way to perhaps the way that recruitment and retention work has worked in the NHS. So yeah, this is just a new way. Let's, you know, try new things to see if we can help retain and recruit our staff. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Nicola, Nick, who's going to deliver the rest of the session. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm just going to give a bit of background to joint hybrid roles just before we hear from some of our speakers. So the main premise, obviously, of these joint roles is that they include both a clinical and a research element. And there's different models that can be used to do this, such as split weeks between the two roles or rotational posts. And you're going to hear about both of those from our speakers shortly. They're usually jointly funded and managed, which can take a bit of working out, but this does enable staff to gain research experience and also maintain their clinical skills, which makes it beneficial to both areas. And as Nicola already mentioned, you know, they can help improve staff recruitment and retention rates because of the opportunities for staff development and also the variety that comes then into that role. And ultimately, they can make research a bit more visible and accessible to patients. Next slide, please. So just wanted to touch on evidence-based practice and how hybrid roles kind of align with that. So there's three elements that come together to enable us to deliver evidence-based practice. So clinical expertise, best research evidence, and patients' values and preferences. And when you think about joint clinical and hybrid roles, they support all three of these elements. So it's just showing how that then links to providing evidence-based care. The next slide. So I'm going to hand over now to Shannon, who's a hepatology nurse doing a joint hybrid role, and she's going to talk about her own experiences in having that role. So over to you, Shannon.
Hello. Yeah, so I'm Shannon. I think I'm 4 months into the hybrid role now. So I've just got some slides. If you could go to the next slide, please. And the next slide, please. So initially, research wasn't really in my mind. It wasn't something that I'd ever considered. But the fact that it was a hybrid role in the speciality that I really liked was a good kind of way to ease into it. So it was quite gentle. I've still got kind of experience on the ward and easing into research without having to take kind of the big commitment to go full time into something that I wasn't really sure if I'd enjoy or not. Next slide, please. I haven't been full time since COVID, so I got really burnt out. Now with this hybrid role, I'm doing 24 hours on the ward and 15 hours research, which is nice. I'm back in a full-time position, but don't feel the stress of being full-time on the ward. Really nice hours. So 2 days research, 2 days on the ward, and I'm still able to keep my unsociable hours, my enhancements. So my wage isn't dropping because I'm changing to kind of 8 till 4 hours, which is really nice. Next slide, please. It's it's for research. I feel like I've been really skilled up, so no experience whatsoever, lots of training days, kind of going through my competencies for research, and it's quite nice in the sense of you've got the 8 till 4, but you can kind of adjust to work alongside clinics, or if you have patients coming in, which is a nice way to do it. And whilst on the ward, I'm also the research link nurse. So now a lot of people on the ward say, and initially they were like, research nurse, we might have a patient who's suitable for a trial, whereas now people recognise me as the research nurse on the ward as well. So other people on the ward who are asking me lots of questions about what the trials are all about, what research is in general. So I think it's kind of a nice little transition for everybody as well, just to kind of understand research as a whole. Next slide, please. I was quite overwhelmed when I first started, completely new everything, new language, new people, and the support from my team here at MRU in Bristol was just I can't fault it. It was absolutely brilliant. They just gave me like a step-by-step guide. This day you need to be signed off here, you need access to this, and it was a really, really good way to kind of ease into the role, which can be quite overwhelming and daunting because it's a new speciality, and I'm being really encouraged to kind of skill up and as time goes on, getting a bit more experienced in the band 6 type of role, but for research versus on the ward. Next slide, please. Issues that I've had with the role. So currently I have 4 contracts with the NHS now. So band 5 on the ward, band 5 bank, band 6 for the MRU, band 6 bank. So initially there was no pay. I just think the contracts wasn't quite set up with payroll and HR, so that was a little bit difficult initially, but it's all resolved now. Because it wasn't set up, I was having issues with each team's seeing what I was working, so logistically that was a little bit difficult, but now that it's set up, it's brilliant. It was just that initial kind of admin thing that kind of was really the only issue that I found in the role, but it is a new role being developed. Next slide, please. Now that I'm getting a little bit more confident and I'm understanding research a little bit more, and I'm really enjoying research, I think 2 days isn't quite enough. So some people do the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off onto the other ward, whereas I do the 2 days a week for each. So I think maybe 3 days would be better, but I think it's just because I'm enjoying research so much that actually I could do with an extra day. I'm understanding the workload a little bit more, but that's just kind of what I'm learning as I'm experiencing it, and I think it's really the only difficulty was logistics with the two wards not kind of having access to see what I was working, but other than that, I think it's been really, really positive otherwise, and that's it really. And next slide. Sorry. Yeah, so 2 days on, 2 days off, and I think it's a nice middle ground for people who are a little bit unsure about research or who don't have experience. So I'm on a 1-year secondment, and then we'll see what happens after. I don't think I would have probably gone into research full time without this role. I think it's just been a really good way to kind of understand what it's all about, what's expected, you know, how amazing research is. My speciality is hepatology, and something that I'm so passionate about now. I'm doing it on the research side, so it's just a nice kind of way to ease you in to the world of research. That's it. Thank you.
That's brilliant. I really like to see and hear what you're saying about the fact that you might see a future in research. And I think, what advice would you have maybe for other people thinking about something similar? I'm just throwing in a question there for you.
I think when I first started, I said to my manager, I have no idea about research. I don't know what's expected of me. It's brand new. Now I would say, now that I'm into it a little bit more, just kind of find out what researchers are going on locally, or find things that you're quite passionate about. For me, I just found it really upsetting that hepatology patients would pass away really young. And now I'm seeing it on the other side, that behind the scenes there's all these amazing trials taking place. Some you know, some trials work, some trials don't. But it's just maybe find what you're passionate about, because I bet you there is research going on behind the scenes that you're just unaware of, whether it's locally in your hospital or just around the UK, just to kind of be a bit more clued up about what's happening, because I was completely oblivious to all of the trials that this hospital was doing until I did this role, whereas now I'm very interested in, oh, they're doing something about this respiratory, or, you know, for cardiac. I just find it very interesting. So probably just be aware of what's going on locally for the speciality that you like, or just in general.
Brilliant, thank you. Nick, I'm handing over to you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Shannon from anybody? Yep, Naomi.
Hello, and thank you so much for sharing, Shannon. That was it's great to hear your experience. I'm Naomi. I'm a research matron in London. I just wanted to ask. So I was in the 70 at 70 NIHR Senior Leaders Programme with Nicola, actually. It's now a few years ago, which is a bit mad that time's gone by. But I undertook a scoping review with some of my colleagues, Julie Menzies and Janine Valentine and Sharon Grieve, and we around research secondments, and there's not much evidence out there, you won't be surprised, but I was really interested particularly to hear about the stuff around pay for you, and I'm really sorry that happened, because it shouldn't, you know, we're not here to not be paid, are we? We're doing our jobs. And one of the kind of big gaps was around how to best manage research secondments, and I was wondering if there was any tips for us who are kind of managers around how we could better manage those kind of practicalities around pay. Like, is there anything you've learned now that you could advise us that we could maybe put in place for a future secondments?
I think two issues arose for me. One, because my other ward, my hepatology clinical role is 24 hours, and then this is 15 or 16, so it brought me above 37.5.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why I had to then go onto the bank before they could process it. So that was kind of one of the reasons it got delayed. But fixed days are brilliant. So now that I'm on the system, Monday, Wednesdays are my working days. My other ward can see that on the ward, and are accommodating. I don't mind doing night shifts, but now they know not to put me on a Sunday night shift, because I was having to get those changed before. So maybe just have it in place. It's hard to have it in place because it wasn't anything to do with research. It was the payroll and HR kind of side of it. But maybe I don't know if this is possible, like a hybrid contract specifically, So then it's already organised. So these are the hours for the ward, these are the hours for research. I don't know if that is possible, but yeah, if possible.
Great, thank you. And definitely encourage you to write out your experience, because there's not much evidence out there for publication.
Great. Thanks for that. And I think a lot of it comes down to communication, doesn't it, between the two areas that are, sharing the role. And I think that's really key in trying to make sure those management and payroll and HR issues are ironed out as soon as possible. So thank you. Any other questions for Shannon? No. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Okay, so next we've got Ashlyn, who's an ICU sister in Bristol, who's been supporting research staff who are on rotational posts, so a slightly different model, and she's going to talk about her experience. So I'll hand over to you, Ashlyn.
Hello everyone and welcome today. Just a little background on myself. I am an ITU sister here at the BRI Bristol Royal Infirmary. We're a busy general intensive care unit, so promoting best practice and evidence-based practice is one of our foundations. We've got a good model which will answer a lot of the questions that were raised to Shannon and Naomi, which I'll get to in just a moment. So can I have the next slide, please? So I'm just going to go through the managing hybrid rotation role in busy ITU. Next slide, please. So looking at roughly the requirements for an intensive care nurse prior to then going into the research seconded role. We do this as a secondment here at the BRI. We rotate every 3 months between ITU and research. We require an experienced nurse to go into the research, to be seconded into the research role. The reason for that is because it's the feedback from the research nurses that have previously done the role is that 3 months was long enough to be away from intensive care, but as an experienced nurse you tend to be that bit more adaptable to change. So coming back to ITU after a stint in research wasn't that disorientating, not requiring supernumerary shifts, and vice versa for those going into research, that they weren't disorientated, they weren't too far away from the loop to lose the momentum of either of their roles. It's a broadened role, and what I mean by that is that experienced, there's a huge scope of learning, a huge scope of practice required again from both sides, from and from the ITU nurse. I went to adapt for change, yeah, and just to for the ITU nurse to be able to understand and practice that role of the research nurse. And similar to what Shannon was saying, from the other side is that we're seeing nurses coming back from their research role, and the static nurses on the unit are aware of who they are now, know that they might have a patient that could be recruited into a particular project. You're a research project, you're on the unit most of the time in both roles. In terms of the research nurse, again, 3 months, yeah, and it gives them a greater understanding to the role of the research nurse. There's flexibility within that role. They've that critical experience as an ITU nurse that they can use in a research nurse role, so that they can recognise the patients that can be recruited into it, but also they have the scope of practice to recognise patients that can be appropriate for research. And that in itself helps improve the uptake and the compliance within any case that was being done. They'll also have the knowledge, the critical care knowledge. And next slide, please. So advantages in the blue box, advantages for managers. In the purple box, trust colours are the advantages for the research nurse. And again, it's as you read, you know, it any bit of knowledge helps us do our jobs much better and improve the patient experience and flow through the units. So increasing our knowledge and skills. It I'm a massive fan of secondments personally myself. I've done lots of them, and it gives you that you become a very adaptable nurse. You understand all the other roles and your experiences, the other roles, the other jobs that our colleagues are doing. There's much better job satisfaction, even insight into other people's roles, as I said. And with the NHS campaign, the retention campaign, it's a bit of a no-brainer. There's less burnout for the ITU nurse and the research nurse. There, from both sides, there's great insight into the research and development. And what we do with that, what we're seeing in research, we're seeing being put into practice. We're seeing the patient as a whole, and it has proven to have greater study uptake. The flexibility is a bit of a no-brainer. Next slide, please. Disadvantages. It does deplete our senior ITU staff, because we do require our senior staff, our experienced staff, to go into the research role as outlined earlier. It can be disorientating going between research. There is that period of instability, which can be an advantage, but it can be a disadvantage. In terms of training and development, or training and education, appraisals, mandatory training can be difficult within that 3-month window to keep up with your intensive care nurse goals, and your research nurse goals and objectives in terms of your personal development. We've got around that by introducing joint appraisals, which can be difficult to coordinate because you're coordinating with 3 individuals. But I'll get to that in just a moment. And then with regard to what I mean by change conditions, there is that it was a disadvantage for doing the 3-month placements in each of the roles. We, as a manager, you're constantly doing change conditions forms. HR are bombarded as it is, and it takes time to get change conditions forms done and processed, etc. And no sooner being done when they're back doing them again. So what we've introduced is the seconded role, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Yeah, and around the difficulty to check in with managers, because you're only there for 3 months, some of our research nurses are on part-time hours, and with our shifts, our long day shifts, it can be difficult within that 3-month window to touch base, even on an informal basis, to touch base with our colleagues, despite best intentions. Next slide, please. So what we've looked at in terms of management, and I have to compliment the team, the research team here at the BRI, and with the team in critical care, is we've looked at it as a seconded role. So there is job security for all the staff going into it. There's no repetitive change of conditions form, so you're just seconded to your role. And what we've done is we pay the researchers as a band 6, and then we do facilitate band 5s, band 5 nurses from ITU doing it, so that offsets the pay discrepancy. So your band 5 ITU nurse will be getting more than social hours. The research hours, we do cover weekends, so they will have some on social hours, but the band 6 up, it's not $1 million, but it offsets and it balances out as best we can. We have to set measurable goals in order to develop our staff. And like I mentioned earlier, the joint appraisals does help with us achieving those measurable goals without it interacting with the research nurse, their role itself, and vice versa, the research nurse not having to achieve any of her goals, their goals and objectives within ICU time, we'll say. And there's less reorientation on return to respective units. Next slide, please. And then just brief summary. It does widen the scope of practice. It's a very flexible role. Communication, I think Nicola mentioned that earlier, just communication is key to allow that flexibility. There is less burnout, and it's a win-win. It increases the job prospects. Many of our previous research nurses have gone on to more senior roles. I think our stats are about 80% have gone on to senior roles. One of them is one of them has one of our ex research nurses is one of my band 7 colleagues, which is wonderful. And then yeah, and the impact that has on our patients' flow, because ultimately our goal is to improve healthcare, improve patients' length of stay, and with collection of evidence-based care, the uptake is great, so it improves the overall flow, so the goal is achieved at the end of the day. Next slide. And then these are the main bodies that our research is being used and appreciated by. And of course, without the National Institute for Health and Clinical Research, we wouldn't be here. Any questions?
Well, I've got lots, but if any of the audience, Helen.
Hello there. I'm just interested in, can I just confirm it's a 3-month secondment and then it's repeated?
Sorry, Helen, I can't hear you very well.
Is it a 3-month secondment repeated for the same nurse?
Yeah.
And how often do they do that? Is that twice in a year, or is it an ongoing rolling?
It's an ongoing rolling secondment.
Oh, okay. I'm just wondering how, what training is put into place. Is it all provided by the research team when they go onto the research area? And do they purely work on intensive care studies, or are they involved in all different types of research?
So our team are involved in intensive care research. They are in the process of joining forces with the ED research team. So that's in its early days, but the intensive care research for now.
Is it on? Do you have a clinical research facility, like a central area where they get the training?
Oh, I'm not 100% sure. They are trained within. So when they're new to research, our research sisters and team provide the training, and a lot of the studies themselves would have training within the research project itself.
Okay, I can also interject on that a little bit, because because I work in the same trust, so in the R&D department. So yeah, we offer training to all research nurses across the trust, but then there will be specific training for the ICU research nurses in-house within the research team there.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
Hiya. I just had a question about the training, just spurred on actually from the last question. So if these are rolling 3-month secondments, when we have a secondment here or somebody new join, it typically takes quite a long time for them to learn the ropes, and we typically wouldn't let them do a CTIMP, for example, very early on. So I'm just wondering how you're managing if it's 3 months and then it's another person and another person. Do you know what I mean? How does that impact on the quality?
We've how many have we off the top of my head? I don't know exactly how many we have run. 1, 2, 3. We've got 4 or 5 research nurses between the cardiac intensive care and the general intensive care. Because they're senior nurses, they're quite adaptable to change, quite fast learners. So they'd have quite a good insight into like intensive care before they even go. So in theory, really, it's only the research projects that they need to be trained up on. And there's a lot of support with them. They have initially they're supernumerary, but as they develop into, like I've said in some of my slides, as they roll through the 3 months, they tend to just slip into the role. But there's always 1 or 2 colleagues there to support them on the job every day. And Katie Sweet, our research band 7, she's always available to help support them on from the research side. And from the ITU side, you know, there's enough of us around to very much offer help when needed.
So you haven't really seen, you know, a negative impact on quality then? There's been, you know, no audits or anything that's shown that it's impacted in that way, or it seems to be working?
Yeah, it seems to be very much a win-win. Unless Nicola sees it from the research side of it, but because I'm very clinical, we just see it as a winner, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, thank you.
Nicola, did you have questions?
Yeah. So how did you budget for it? Where did the budget come from? Is it a bit of research? Is it a bit of clinical?
Clinical, so from intensive care, and then it was trial and error over the time to try and facilitate what was best and to ensure payments, like Shannon was saying. You know, it could be you're not getting paid initially, so they worked around it with HR, and a lot of communication with HR, payroll, and our ITU matrons to facilitate that.
So what does it come to? Because that's not quite one whole time equivalent, is it, for a year if you're doing 3 months on, 3 months off? Or, you know, what if you're thinking about statistics in budget, what does that look like?
Oh, I'd have to get back to you on the finer details on that, Neil, because yeah, I understand what you're saying. I haven't got the full answer for you.
Yeah, just sort of thinking. Go on.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, for other departments and things, if you're thinking, okay, if this means that I have to take one whole time equivalent out of my budget to do, okay, let's plan for that, you know. So that just be useful to hear.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's any different to like flexible working, because we try to fill that gap with you know, other members of staff, as in, you know, they'll be 6 months a year in research, so there's 6 months in ITU, but there's another ITU nurse rotating the opposite months.
Yeah.
So it's filling that one full-time equivalent as a whole, but it's with 2 nurses.
Yeah, so
So
does
one for
the research nurse come to ITU?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do the
Oh, yes,
clinical shifts for the 3 months, yeah.
yeah, sorry, I wasn't. Yeah, our research nurses are for critical care, because they are critical care. They rotate between critical care and ITU. They are ITU nurses. So when they're not in research, they're on their base unit, be that cardiac intensive care or general intensive care. And 2 of our research nurses have actually worked in both units. They've rotated between cardiac intensive care. We've 2 adult intensive cares at the BRI. We've an adult and a cardiac intensive care. So they'd have experience in both.
And have any of the other departments, wards in your organisation said, we would like to do the same sort of thing? And have you been able to persuade them to do a similar role?
Just in speaking with our Band 7 research, Nurse Katie Sweet recently, they are looking into joining forces with A&E research team. So I expect there'll be discussions at looking at the model that we use in the critical care research rotation and A&E, but that's still in its infancy.
Yeah, I'm sure Naomi, if she's still on the call, maybe you would like to write something up with Aisling and Shannon, because it's really interesting for others to hear, for sure. And also, have you lost any staff full-time to research because of this?
No, we've stolen them to the Band 7 intensive care team.
That's good. That's good. That's good. And just another one around, so obviously this is more research delivery, so delivering other people's studies. Have you found any improvements or benefits in terms of quality improvement and, knowing where to find evidence to inform practice and clinical improvements? Have you seen any benefits there?
I think the main benefits that we've seen is that the research team are always around. They're either there on their 3-month ICU time, where they're used as not used, wrong word, that they're available as a reference to help promote research. So if any question was raised, they're there as a reference, as are the multidisciplinary team. In terms of finding knowledge, that they're there with us to liaise with us. We're always working as a multidisciplinary team. So if there were any questions raised, we communicate it out. The uptake has been quite. We've got good rates of uptake into research and recruiting patients into research because of that role and the presence of the research team.
Brilliant. Sounds brilliant.
Yeah, there's a great insight because we've noticed boards. There's any new research project. There's communication going out. We've bulletins every week. They're around all the time. They're joining all our morning huddles. Their presence is there. Any new studies, any new studies that are there, we're encouraged to participate. Even those that are, all nurses are encouraged to participate in the study. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, Nick.
Great.
Oh, Chrissy.
Christine.
Just like to ask a quick question, if that's all right. We've got some challenges locally at the moment with 7-day recruitment for trials for ICU. I just wonder whether you find this sort of model has helped support that 7-day service for recruitment as well. Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
We've got some challenges at the moment locally with 7-day recruitment for some of our ICU studies, looking at some commercial trials that are coming through. Do you think a model like this is better? Because you see that, seeing that from your advantages that you talked about, it's more exposure for a kind of ICU trained staff into research. Do you get better recruitment over that 7-day model for support for kind of out of hours recruitment?
Absolutely, because they're there all the time. Because they're there all the time, they're always there. So the recruitment and retention rates are quite high because of that.
Because the research team actually works 7 days a week, don't they, Aisling?
Yeah,
they do.
They
do
work
long days.
weekends, and that helps with even out their pay as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to, Anthony now is going to talk about his own experience and how research plays a part in his job plan. So Anthony, cross over to you.
Thank you very much. I am going to just put my slides up. I don't know if people can see that.
Yeah.
So I just think I'm Anthony Jemmott, community matron in mental health from Camden and Islington. Just to probably put it into context, so in terms of my first appetite, I would say, for research is when I started back in 1997 when I completed my BSc in medical biochemistry. I did that at King's College, and it was sort of the hardcore end of research, pipetting stuff in the labs until 2 in the morning. We were looking at some studies around septic shock, septicemia, nitric oxide synthese, and stuff like that. And then I went into nursing after that. And then I was introduced to nursing research, which was very different to what I was doing previously. So I had to sort of transition and get my head around that in terms of how nursing research took place. Quite different. So it was that whole thing between qualitative and quantitative research that I needed to sort of put my head together and get a better understanding in terms of how the approach it's taken in nursing. And just to fast forward, so since within my role as a mental health nurse, the first bit of study that I got involved in within nursing was an audit or evaluation of when I did my NMP course within the trust. We had one of the associate director of nursing, then Fiona Nolan. Now she's Professor Nolan. She kept sort of harassing me, Anthony, you need to research this. This is all new for the trust, the NMP stuff. I said, okay, let's do this. And we applied for a small grant from the Burdett Trust from the Queen's Nursing, and we were successful. And it was to set up a clinic within a GP practice, looking at prescribing antipsychotics, supporting the GPs. And that was really successful. And from there, we continued in terms of looking at other bits of research, evaluation that I have done within the organization. So I presented a poster for the European Association of Psychiatry within Warsaw, Poland. This was back in 2019, and it was accepted. I worked with an MSc student who was on placement, and we looked at developing a physical health screening tool for people with severe mental illness. And we were looking at the tool, and the MSc student did some data crunching, and we presented that. One of the things I'll remember with this is that I sort of stayed away from the data analysis and more stuck towards the clinical side. And in the end, whilst I was going to Poland, the student could not have come. Her mother took ill. So I was on the plane sort of trying to understand the data. And it was really a learning curve for me in that you need to keep your heads in both places when you're looking at any sort of audit evaluation, because anything can happen. So that was a learning curve for me. That was a success in terms of the presentation, and it got a lot of exposure with that. A lot of people kept asking for the tool, if they can use it. And then now within my role as a community matron, I sort of embed research within my current role. It's slightly different to the other presenters we had earlier on in terms of how they were coming at it from the other angle. So I keep my contract as it is. I negotiated with my manager in terms of having that time. One thing I forgot to mention when I was doing the first bit in terms of the non-medical prescribing within the GP practice, I did have to change that within my contract, and it was about 1 day a week. And that was changed and adjusted with HR to suit. But now what I have done, I have my work plan, which is the 10 rules of the matron that have been laid down within the matron's handbook. And what I've done, I've mapped that on my work plan, and all the experiences, all what I do, all my tasks, I map that against each of the 10 rules. And as you can see here within personal and professional development, education and training, research and development, these are all the research studies that I have been involved with as a principal investigator, and I managed to embed that within my role, business as usual in terms of research and development. One thing I will say is that as leaders, it's important that we give the people who we are supporting that opportunity. Had it not be for Professor Nolan giving me that opportunity at the start with the NMP clinic and looking at getting a grant, I may not have been here in terms of research today. And just one last thing I would leave you all with is that if you are a nurse, a registered nurse or a midwife, trainee nursing associate, healthcare assistant, you are already a researcher. Yeah. And don't let anyone tell you anything differently. So I'll just leave you with that. That's it for me. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Anthony. Just listening to those three inspirational speakers there is absolutely brilliant. I just love the way, Anthony, you follow the Matron's Handbook as a guide to formulate your job plan, and obviously research is within that. So yeah, as the matrons that are on the call, please look at the research section of that handbook, and all of the webinars and everything that we do are all linked to it, hopefully educating, enabling, helping people to understand how they can fit that into the day job. And you know, as matrons or leaders, you don't have to be a PI for a study like Anthony is. He's gone down that route. You know, there are other things that you can do. And obviously with the theme of today, one of the things that you can do is support your staff to go on these sorts of secondments, you know, bringing in these hybrid roles. And I suppose we should say that obviously we've talked a lot about research delivery studies that these hybrid roles support, but there are other clinical academic type hybrid roles where somebody might be doing a bit of an internship looking at an actual development of a homegrown study. And I think next month's webinar will you know, talk around the more academic side. So there are lots and lots of different things that you can do as a matron to embed research. But these examples are absolutely brilliant to hear on how it is actually possible to do it. And this is absolutely changing things for that service and for those patients that go through. So yeah, has anybody got any questions for Anthony? The silence. And we should put the music on in that again. Somebody needs to learn how to sing. But yeah, I mean, I suppose I've got a question. How would you say that the matrons are using the handbook in that way, and have research on their work plan as well in your organisation?
I think they are. I think it needs to be more streamlined and have it as business as usual. I am not sure if they are using research in the same way. I am trying to influence that. I do share my work plan with the other matrons, because within our service we've got community matrons that whereby you take an overview of all the stuff that's going on, quality, safety, in charge of the clinics that take place, and you have what we call physical health matrons that are focusing specifically on the mortality rate with people with SMI, severe mental illness, trying to reduce that. So running health screening clinics within physical health. Most of them are dually trained to look at and make sure that we are carrying out annual physical health checks, detecting any early signs of any physical health before it comes to a chronic stage. So to answer your question, it is happening, but it needs to be done in a more systematic way.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting from Aisling's point of view as well. Are any of the leaders in your organisation following the research bit of the handbooks for matrons, ward leaders? Do you know? And are you?
Sorry, I'd like to think we are. I'd like to, I'd like to think we are, but I think as a research sister would probably answer that much better because she'd be able to see it from the outside. But I'd like to think that we are.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's I think COVID hit around the time when they were published as well. So, you know, we have got that sort of in the way, but I think they are going to be relaunching the handbooks soon. So there will be a lot more coming out in terms of published stuff. So, sorry, were you going to say something? No. Right, we do have some Menti questions, but we only have 5 minutes left. So we might just do one question, if that's all right. So I'm going to try, Declan, to share my screen. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so if you have your phone or the computer there, if you could type in menti.com into your phone or your computer, and I'm just having a look because I'm sure that the code has changed, so just bear with me. Technology. Oh, Chrissy, have you got your hand up?
No, sorry, it might be a historic hand. I'll make sure I do it.
Okay. So if you go on to menti.com, it asks you for a code. So the code is 76067241. So if you are able to put that into...
You put that code in the chat. It was a bit quick for me.
Yeah. Trying to do this in 4 minutes now. 7606. Let's see if I can copy it. Yeah. Okay, popped into the chat. Okay, so the first question is, oh, we've got some answers coming there. As senior leaders, what support would you need to set up a hybrid role in your department? So we've got support from clinical areas, the buy-in of the clinical leaders in the department, HR support on contracts, finance options, advisory, contracts and managing pay effectively, standardised training package. Oh, we've got lots of answers. This is good. Improving staffing to enable us to cover workload. Yeah, I mean, that's an age-old one, isn't it? But hopefully this is something that would help you improve the staffing. You know, it's not going to do it in the short term, but in the long term, this, you know, it would help that recruitment and retention. Workforce to be stable. It's all valid points. Okay, with time, just moving on to the next question. What barriers would you foresee with this, and what might be the solutions? So I know some people have sort of alluded to that probably in the first questions. You know, budget is definitely something that I would think about. You know, should I speak to my research department to see whether they have a bit of a budget that they can share with us to do that sort of thing? Targeted recruitment is a good answer there. Workforce issues, short-staffed in clinical areas, lack of communication and insight between the departments. That's a valid one as well. Oops. Funding for post-training, buy-ins from execs for funding and rolling out, improve staffing to support supernumerary staff. These are all really, really great answers, actually, which it would be good if we will put these together and we can put them on the Futures NHS webpage for you then to take back to your senior people in your organisations, because some of you may be supporting the SORT tool assessment as well in your organisation, which is looking at research readiness. And some of this actually might be really relevant to help think about what, you know, might be the potential questions and solutions within your organisation. And then the last question, how could you as a senior leader include research within your role? So I suppose going back to what Anthony has shown, that he has been able to embed it within his role, and whatever that role may be, whether it's even as a band 5 nurse, AHP, midwife, you know, in those clinical areas, how might you be able to include that within your role? Including, yeah, one-to-one and appraisals, yeah. We've got a previous webinar on appraisals, link nurses, yeah. So comments and target Black and Asian workforce. Brilliant. Appraisals. Loads of great answers there that need a bit of an analysis with a bit of a research head on maybe. Okay, so it is 3 o'clock. I'm really conscious, so sorry that we've had to rush that last one there. Declan, I don't know if you could just put the last slide up just to show when our next webinar is. Yeah, so our next webinar is on the 2nd of July. And the theme is on extended multidisciplinary teams, how researchers can support your service. So is Chris on? Are you still there, Christine?
I am. Yes, I am. And I've just put something in the chat as well to remind everybody. So hope as many as possible can join us. Please spread the word.
That again is going to be really interesting one. So please do pass on the message to your clinical colleagues about attending these conferences and sign up to the Futures NHS web page. And then the last slide is just, I think, our contact details. Yeah, my contact details. So thank you so much for coming today and listening and bearing with us. I thought that was a really interesting, really great webinar. So thank you to all our presenters as well. And we will see you next month. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Do any of the presenters want to just stay on just for a couple of minutes after? Thanks, everybody.